Our guest today is a mom, a public speaker, and the author of Weed Mom, the Canna-Curious Woman's Guide to Healthier Relaxation, Happier Parenting, and Chilling the F Out. Danielle Simone Brand, thank you for joining me on the Suburban Women Problem.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. I'm thrilled to be here.
We know all about the wine moms. In fact, this podcast is produced by an organization called Red, Wine, and Blue. But your book is called Weed Mom. So could you tell us a little bit about your journey with cannabis and why you decided to write this book?
Yeah, that's a great question because my cannabis journey is kind of a circuitous one. I actually kind of hated it because I married somebody who overused cannabis and who leaned on it really for his mental health when he probably should have been using an array of tools. I think cannabis is a help for mental health for a lot of people, but I think if you lean on it exclusively, it can cause some problems. And so it did that for him. It's a weird way to start out a book that's really pro cannabis to say, hey, my husband had a problem with it. But it's real. And I wanted people to read it and feel like I was a relatable person. And I've been through, issues, which I absolutely have. So, I didn't like it for a while, didn't think it was for me, wasn't my bag. And then I got into it through the sort of the intellectual route. I started becoming a freelance writer around the time that California was legalizing. I was living in California. So much interest in the topic at that time, right? And so I was getting all kinds of assignments about cannabis from freelance, in my freelance work before I even cared that much about it. But I had to learn, I had to research, and I had to interview. And I ended up falling in love with it, honestly. It bridges science and health and wellness. And I come from a yoga background as well as an academic background. So that was really interesting to me. It's about, social justice and equity. It's about, the culture. And then I was like, okay, I've got to dip my toe into the waters of legal cannabis here. And I got a low dose vape pen, got on my yoga mat, and was really cautious, but I had a very wellness centric experience. I had a beautiful embodied experience, and I realized, okay, this is a wellness tool. Moms could use this. Moms I know could be benefiting. And so, that it was really just a hop, skip, and a jump down the cannabis path for me from there. And I became a total enthusiast and weed writer.
I love how you kind of have a spectrum of perspectives and that you started out not really knowing much about it and really not liking it to as you learned more, you were a lot more open to it. And I think that can be translated to so many things in our society right now, where a lot of people are really against things that they don't really know that much about. But if they had an opportunity to really engage with it and learn about it, they might realize that the thing they hate, they don't actually hate it. It was just that they didn't really know as much about it until they took the time to really dive into it. So I love that story.
I think that's true. It's really true about cannabis. Absolutely. And that's why I wrote the book, because I think that once people learn about it and know about it, they won't fear it and hate it quite so much.
Speaking of that, I think we're getting to a point in our country here in America where people are a lot more open about learning about cannabis. And, it just seems a lot more acceptable now, and people are a lot more willing to have that conversation or to admit that they've tried cannabis. There's just a lot more acceptance and tolerance and maybe even intrigue. But there are still those out there that have the Reefer Madness stereotypes in their minds. So what are some misconceptions about being a weed mom or just about weed in general?
Yeah, this is a great question because those stereotypes and stigmas totally exist. They persist, as we all know. I think the biggest ones are about being lazy, irresponsible, not able to fulfill your roles if you use cannabis as a mom. That is really far from the truth based on the dozens and dozens, probably hundreds at this point, of women that I've interviewed about their cannabis use and my own experience as well, and also interviewing lots of experts and, cannabis science people. So the truth is that there's a wide spectrum of cannabis usage, from totally non-impairing, non-intoxicating CBD that might just help with certain conditions, maybe some sleep, anxiety, pain sort of thing, to, being very, very stoned and not able to parent. Like there's a very wide range. And so I always advise parents to stay on that, stay on the side of low dose, moderate, and microdosing to really just, shift your perspective a little bit. It's not about, using it to the max. It's really just about calibrating your dose, your product to find your sweet spot. And honestly, moms I talk to say that it helps them be more productive. It's the opposite of being lazy. Again, it's dose dependent, it's product dependent. Cannabis is not a one thing. There's so many modes of administration, so many ways that we can take it in: smoking, vaping, eating, drinking, sublinguals, tinctures, topicals, serums. Like there's so many ways. And so, just educating people about the wide range of use and the wide range of possibilities of how you can feel with cannabis is, I think, really helpful for that.
The truth is, there are a lot of people who look just like me who have a very different experience. Can you talk a little bit about the often racist history of marijuana laws in our country?
This is such an important issue and something that in the cannabis space we are talking about more and more and more. And I'm happy to see that. I want new people to come into cannabis and enjoy it and all these things, but they need to know about this past, this history, this reality. And it's not just the past, it's the present, right? Cannabis laws from the very beginning of Prohibition and the Reefer Madness era, it was targeted specifically against brown and black people, Mexican immigrants and laborers who were coming up from Mexico and bringing the practice of using cannabis to help ease the pains of physical labor, and this was low dose cannabis and something that really wasn't a societal issue at all, but they made it one because of xenophobia and racism. Cannabis was specifically identified with Black and brown communities and demonized specifically in a very racialized way. And from the beginning, the war on drugs, has been unequally targeting people of color, disrupting communities, in some cases devastating communities. And it's not just the war against cannabis, it's the war on drugs. And we have 40,000 cannabis prisoners still languishing today, and that's wrong. Yes, I want a legal regulated industry. Yes, it can be fun. It can be medicine. It can be all sorts of things. And we need to right these wrongs and to do what we can to help bring people out of prison for this, to rewrite the laws. We need expungement. We need, we need social equity programs that help actually create generational wealth for people who've been disproportionately affected. So yes, this is a huge, important part of our industry.
I see this as a lawmaker as well, because a lot of times, as states are adopting these laws that will basically bring cannabis production, and basically introduce an entirely new industry to their state. But a lot of those laws are also written to where if you have ever been charged with anything drug related ever, you cannot take part in this new industry. And I've always felt like that was not necessarily fair, because, again, you are penalizing someone now for something they did before, where if the law that you're writing now was in place before, they would have never been in jail in the first place. It's a way to exclude certain groups of people, specifically people of color, from entering into the industry in a meaningful way and really being able to take part in the industry, because they get written out.
And it varies state by state so much when it comes to who can participate in the industry, who gets priority licenses, all that stuff. New York is a place to look at for maybe, hopefully, fingers crossed, doing it the right way. Their social equity program seems to be, pretty involved and thoughtful. Of course, they haven't started legal sales yet, and licenses haven't been awarded, and so that really remains to be seen. But there specifically, if you have been negatively impacted, specifically incarcerated through association with cannabis and the drug war, you actually get priority for licenses. So they're doing it the opposite way, which is great. But you're right that in so many places it was done the wrong way.
All right, so let's shift a little bit and talk about parenting. So I would love to hear more about how weed intersects with your parenting, and what ways do you find that it helps you be a better mom?
I am better physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, even with cannabis in my life. I sleep better, which is huge after having my kids who didn't sleep like at all for a while. I had some sleep issues, and really, so finding that like peaceful 8 hours again has been huge for me, and cannabis helps there. Certainly pain. I have migraines, and Cannabinoids in general help me just ward off migraines. Eliminating alcohol and substituting it with cannabis helps me with migraines too. So that's a little trade off. And mood management too, honestly. I mean, I don't have any clinical diagnoses, but I do suffer from anxiety, as so many of us do. I do have, moments of overwhelm and irritability with my kids. And, cannabis in the right doses, again, right doses, right products. And I know my body and I know how I respond to it because I have experimented enough. I know that it can help me shift just a little bit
Right.
and just be more present, be more fun, be more creative. And these are for those low stakes at home moments where we're bonding and playing or reading or cooking or gardening. It's not where I'm driving them around town or anything. So I'm
Right.
safe
Yeah,
and
I gotcha.
responsible, but absolutely it helps me interact with my kids and it also just helps me feel better physically.
As a parent, we always are trying to figure out the best way to talk to our kids about sensitive subjects. What do you think about telling our kids about cannabis or whether or not we are using cannabis? And just how would we talk to them about drug use in general?
Yeah, so that is such an important issue. There is no one right conversation, right? But there are sort of guidelines and ways into the conversation that I think are helpful. I think that if it's not too risky for the parents, like, considering the legal status of cannabis in their state, their job, their co parenting situation, if that's applicable, those things do matter. But if it's safe for you, if it's not too risky for you, I do recommend honesty, because I think to change the narrative, we have to talk to kids, right? To change the cultural, societal narrative around the plant, we actually have to educate them. I do talk to my kids a lot. Lots of moms that I interview do the same, because it's about normalization and being responsible at the same time. I want them to feel like plant medicine, cannabis is normal, and it's not for them yet.
A lot of parents don't necessarily hide that they have a glass of wine with dinner, and you have a conversation with your kid and explaining them why they can't have that yet. The more we make things mysterious, the more curious kids are about those things. So, speaking of curious, if we have listeners that are canna curious, where do you recommend they start?
First of all, I do recommend going to the legal marketplace. We're voting for it. Polls show we want it, so let's support it with our dollars. I know it's expensive on the legal marketplace, but you're much more likely to get quality tested products there. I think CBD is always an easy entry for folks because it's non-intoxicating. It does change the way we feel a little bit, but it doesn't impair the way THC in higher quantities can do. So I think that's a super easy entry. People can take a little bit for pain or for anxiety and see how they feel. CBD works better with a tiny bit of THC in conjunction. That's the science about how our receptors work and how these two compounds interact with our endocannabinoid system. So, a little tiny bit of THC, if people are afraid, the tiniest amount they won't actually feel. It'll just potentiate the CBD. So I think that's helpful to just reassure people, like you're not going to get high from this at all. There are so many options. Most people still equate cannabis with smoking a joint or smoking a bong, which is fun for lots of people, but not the only way. There's vaping and vaporizing that is even healthier than vaping and smoking. There's, like I mentioned, all sorts of different edible products and tinctures and things. So you don't have to smoke if you don't want to. That's a good thing to know. I always say start low and go slow. If you don't get any effect the first time, that's okay, because I'd rather that than you take too much and have a bad experience.
Start low, go slow.
That's right.
Before we go, we like to ask a few rapid fire questions. So, are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
First question. What's a song that every time you hear it, you have to sing every word?
Okay, I may or may not have been screaming the lyrics to Like a Prayer the other day.
Hey, it's a good song. Were you alone?
I was with 10 other Canna moms, actually, and we were at this amazing event in Chicago. It's called Daybreaker, where it's a sober dance party in a museum, and it was amazing.
I love it. All right. Next question. What movie do you watch to cheer yourself up after a hard day?
Ooh, the movies that make me feel uplifted and good about humanity are like Hamilton and Encanto. I love Lin-Manuel Miranda's just whole vibe and take on humanity.
I know I find myself dancing to the songs from Encanto all the time.
Totally.
We don't talk about Bruno. Right. I read that you're from Hawaii. So, what was the best part of growing up on a tropical island?
Okay, having the same wardrobe all year is pretty great. Also, it's beautiful.
I can imagine. Also, I'm slightly jealous that you lived in Hawaii. I want to go there one day. It's on my list of things to do very soon, actually. So, what's your favorite treat when you've got the munchies?
Okay, I have this spread. It's hazelnut and chocolate like Nutella, and I put it on water crackers, just like very plain crackers, and it's so good. The crunch, the creaminess, the sweetness, the hazelnut, the chocolate. Mm.
That sounds delicious. Munchies or not, that just sounds absolutely delicious. What's your favorite date night with your husband?
Watch a play or some live music, or just walk around downtown. It's always fun.
So that is the end of our rapid fire questions. Where can people go to find out more about you and your book?
I am most active right now on Instagram at Danielle Simone Brand. That's also the name of my website, daniellesimonebrand.com. And yeah, you can find me on the other platforms too, just not quite as frequently.
Well, it's been so great talking to you about weed moms and weed and Canna-Curiosity and all the things. Thank you so much for stopping by the Suburban Women Problem.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. It's been a pleasure.